Hello guys. So, for the chapter 3 of our software engineering course, our topic is regarding agile software development. So, previously, we already had a very brief description of what an agile software development or what is an agile software methodology, no? So, as I mentioned previously, itong mga type of software processes under the agile umbrella is focused more on the iterative development. So, ibig sabihin po, when we say iterative, this is the type of development wherein we could accommodate different types of changes along the way. So, in Agile, basically, we're gonna set a certain time to produce a prototype. Okay, evaluate that prototype, no? The result of that evaluation will be then used to further develop yung inyong prototype up until such time na the developed product is acceptable para sa user. So let's start, no? For the topics covered in this discussion, that will be the agile methods, plan-driven and agile development, extreme programming, okay, or dun sa latter part ng discussion natin will be referred to as XP, okay? We also have agile project management and scaling agile methods. So, let's start, no? First is rapid software development. So, rapid development and delivery is now often most important requirement for software systems. So, kapag sinabi nating rapid software development, no, this could be an example of agile methodologies, okay, or a methodology under the agile umbrella. Okay? So, dito sa rapid development, no, as the term suggests, no, you develop parts of the software rapidly. Okay, so producing prototype, have it evaluated by the customer. Okay, so in businesses operate in a fast-changing requirement, and it is practically impossible to produce a set of stable software requirements. So software has to evolve quickly to reflect changing business needs. So paano nga ba pumapasok sa agile development ang rapid software development, no? As you can see, no, it is mentioned here that in businesses, change is inevitable. So, anything na magkaroon dun sa na change dun sa business, no, the software na ginagamit nila should be able to adapt, okay, or that software should be able to evolve. So, paano ba gagawin yon? Paano ba kayo magkakaroon ng development wherein the development or wherein the change na i-develop nyo for that software will happen as fast as possible. So, doon tayo ngayon gumagamit ng mga agile methodologies. Okay? So, one good example of agile methodology is rapid software development. So, pagdating sa rapid software development, no, usually, ang focus is the development of software. So, more on the development side, not on the documentation side. Okay? So, kasi ang aim po for rapid development is to produce your prototype as soon as possible. So, for rapid software development, no, system is developed as a series of version with stakeholders involved in version evaluation. So, katulad nga no sinabi natin kanina, no, in agile development, as much as possible, no, we produce yung ating prototype, sabihin na natin in a certain time period. So, let's say na 2 weeks, every 2 weeks, you produce your prototype. So, same lang din ang concept dito with rapid development, no? You produce system versions or yung mga tinatawag natin na prototype, no? Wherein yung stakeholders o yung tinatawag po natin na clients natin or yung customers natin is involved sa evaluation kasi basically they're the one that will tell you, okay na ba itong prototype na to? Okay na ba itong feature na to? Before you could proceed. So, kumbaga, in rapid software development, no, you as the development team, produce nyo yung prototype nyo, evaluate yung stakeholder yan or yung customer nyo, okay ba sa kanya yan? Hindi. Kung okay na, proceed na kayo sa susunod. Kung hindi, ano yung iterations na gustong ipagawa ng customer? Yun ang gagawin nyo. So, user interfaces are often developed using an IDE and graphical toolset. So, kapag sinabi nating IDE, no, Integrated Development Environment. So, ito po yung mga softwares na ginagamit natin to develop your software. So, pwede it's an IDE na siguro pwede nating pinaka-basic na example is NetBeans, no? Or, ayun nga, no? Any software na pwede natin gamitin to develop applications, softwares, etc., etc. Next, we have agile methods. So dissatisfaction with the overheads involved in software design methods of the 1980s and 1990s led to the creation of agile methods. So first, ano ba itong overheads na to? Kapag sinabi nating overheads dito, no, this means extra cost. So ibig sabihin, no, way back in the 1980s and 1990s, no, before the implementation or before the use of agile methodologies, it's very common to have overheads pagdating sa software development. Why? Kasi sabi nga natin kanina, no, change is inevitable. So traditionally, the development of softwares, alam niyo yun, uses plan-driven processes wherein, ayun nga, no, everything should be planned, and kapag merong something na hindi nasunod dun sa plan nyo, plan-driven methodologies won't, alam niyo yun, easily adapt dun sa mga changes na mangyayari. So, every change na nangyayari dun sa mga plan-driven development will, alam yun, magkakaroon ng extra cost. Okay? Kasi everything is planned, everything is budgeted. Kapag merong hindi nasunod sa plano, dalawa lang yan. Dalawa yung maapektuhan yan. Okay? The project will consume more time and more money. So, yung overheads na yun, no, could be overheads pagdating sa time, or most probably that refers to extra cost. Okay? So, pagdating sa agile methods, no, focus on code rather than design. So, these are based on iterative approach to software development. So, tulad nga na sinabi natin kanina, no, iterative, wherein yung mga software methodologies na to, okay, could enable yung change kasi pwede silang mag-go back dun sa previous na phase or step nila na hindi inuulit yung kabuuan ng process. Okay? So, are intended to deliver working software quickly and evolve this quickly to meet changing requirements. So, again, no, kapag sinabi po nating agile methodology, it's an iterative model that accommodates change, okay, wherein kapag merong change na nangyari, you are still able to proceed dun sa change na, alam mo yun, you can still proceed dun sa pag-address ng change na yon. Okay? So, as I've mentioned previously, no, katulad ng sa capstone, yun, every defenses, there will be new recommendations, no? So, that's why I suggest when you're selecting your methodology in the software development, particularly for your capstone project, no, you use agile methods. Kasi every now and then there will be additional requirements or there will be requirements that will be removed. Okay? Agile methodologies should be able to accommodate yung mga ganong klase ng changes. The aim of agile methods is to reduce overheads in the software process. So for example, by limiting documentation and to be able to respond quickly to changing requirements without excessive rework. Okay? Kasi kapag there is change along the way, no, in agile methodologies, hindi mo kailangan tapusin yung kabuuan ng project before you proceed to address the change. In agile methodologies, every change na nangyari, pwede nyo i-address yan agad-agad. Okay? Kasi you're working on prototypes. Hindi mo kailangan buuin yung kabuuan ng software before you apply the change. Implement mo na yung change, apply mo na yung change, dun pa lang sa small prototype na ginagawa mo. Next, this is the Agile Manifesto. So, we are uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others to do it. Through this work, we have come to value, okay, individuals and interactions over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, responding to change over following plan. So, these are some of the very basic ideas of agile, no? So, individuals and interaction over processes and tools. So, pagdating sa agile methodology, no, they're not focused, or alam yun, the focus is not on processes and tools. Okay? So, yung mga individuals, particularly the development team, will have their, sabihin na natin, freedom to choose. Ano ba yung pwede nilang gamitin na set of tools or set of processes on how they're going to develop the software. Okay, nasa sa kanila yon. They're allowed to do or allowed to choose kung ano man yung mapipili nila. The catch is kung ano yung hinihingi ng client should be provided by the development team regardless kung ano yung gagamitin nila. Kung ano yung pinag-usapan na oras, ano yung pinag-usapan na sabihin na natin, requirements or specs ng software, madi-deliver regardless kung ano yung ginagamit na process or tools. Next is working software over comprehensive documentation. Now, in agile methodology, no, the documentation is very minimal. So, ano ba ibig sabihin ng documentation? So, when we say documentation, it means that every part of the software, okay, is documented, written, there will be a written document na magdi-describe. Kung halimbawa, it's as easy as a manual. Okay? So, it's a part of documentation where ipapakita doon or ilalagay doon ng mga developers, no, how the users or the trainers will be able to use yung software na dinevelop nila. Okay? Next is customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Sa contract negotiation, it's basically you're talking about what are the requirements. Okay? Susulat yan sa contract. How long will the development last and how much is yung, alam niyo, yung kabuuan ng software. In Agile Manifesto, no, instead of providing a very detailed contract wherein kung ano lang yung nakasulat doon, yun lang yung gagawin ng development team. In Agile, no, the focus is more on customer collaboration. So basically, every prototype that is being produced in Agile methodologies, the customer, okay, or representative of the customer should be part ng evaluation. Para every prototype, okay, makikita nung customer or yung representative ng customer, ano ba yung progress? Ito nga ba talaga yung hinihingi ko? Okay? So, very important yung customer collaboration in Agile. Next is responding to change over following a plan. So, again, no, katulad nung sa plan-driven, everything is laid out in a plan. Okay, pagdating sa Agile, if there is change, respond agad dun sa change na yon. Doesn't necessarily mean na kailangan mong katapusin yung kabuuan ng project. Once change is implemented, address the change, respond to change. So, while there is value on the items on the right, no, Agile methodologies or the Agile Manifesto value the items on the left more. Okay. Next, so here will be a summary of the principles for Agile methods. So the first principle that we have is customer involvement. So customers should be closely involved throughout the development process. Their role is to provide and prioritize new system requirements and to evaluate the iterations of the system. So as we've mentioned earlier, no, in Agile methodologies, customer involvement is very crucial. So as I mentioned earlier, every now and then, the development team will be producing the prototype. Okay, that prototype will not only be evaluated by the development team, but also by the customer. So again, no, as I mentioned earlier, it doesn't necessarily mean na yung actual customer yung magte-test dyan. It could be a representative of the customer. Why? Kasi nga, in Agile methodologies, okay, we're producing the prototype. So, paano nyo ngayon malalaman if the prototype is working correctly? Okay, kailangan makita yan ni customer. Or at least the representative of the customer. Okay? Para the customer should be able or will be able to monitor what will be the progress of the development ng software na pinapagawa niya. Next is incremental delivery. So, the software is developed in increments with the customer specifying the requirements to be included on each increment. So, when we say incremental delivery, no, katulad ng sinabi natin kanina, a prototype is actually a working software. And kulang, okay? The software is incomplete, but it's functioning. Okay, so in this incremental delivery, no? So katulad ng sinabi natin kanina, every now and then you produce the prototype. Yung prototype na yon is a working prototype na pwedeng gamitin ng customer. Pwedeng i-check ng customer. So, si customer ngayon, every now and then, nakikita niya kung ano na yung progress, no? Hindi niya kailangan maghintay na sobrang tagal. At the end, kapag natapos na sa kanya na makikita, and if there are, sabihin na natin, parts of the system na ayaw niya, i-reward niyo ng buo. So, in incremental delivery, such as in Agile methodologies, every prototype is checked. Kapag na-check yan, kapag okay, you proceed to the next step. Kung may mali, address the change. Next is people, not process. So the skills of the development team should be recognized and exploited. So team members should be left to develop their own ways of working without prescriptive processes. So as we mentioned earlier, no, the development team, particularly itong mga nag-implement ng agile methodologies, no, will have the development team will have their privilege to choose anong klaseng processes yung gagamitin nila, what type of tools yung gagamitin nila for the development of the software, as long as they deliver what is expected from them. Okay? So, more on people. Kung halimbawa, itong tao na to is magaling dun sa user interface, then pagawan mo siya nung sa user interface. Okay? So, let's say for example, itong tao na to nahihirapan sa paggawa ng schema. So, the development team, pwede kayo magtulungan. Okay? It doesn't necessarily mean na in Agile, there is a, kumbaga, para kung ano yung nakaalat na position sa'yo, yun lang yung gagawin mo, no? So, hindi kayo maghihintayan dito. In Agile, no? Dahil you're producing your prototype as soon as possible, no? Tulungan. Okay? Hindi pwedeng yung isang tao is idle. Okay? Kasi, oy, graphic artist lang ako. Or graphic artist ako. Ang gagawin ko lang will be yung user interface, no? In the development team, particularly, yun nga, no? Nag-i-implement ng Agile methodologies. Tulungan. Okay? Kasi prototype yung kailangan nyo i-produce agad yung prototype nyo. Hindi porket idle ka, graphic artist ka, wala ka nang gagawin. Okay? Siguro, pwede ka mag-test ng software. Doon ka sa testing ng mga modules na natapos na. No? Something like that. Next is embrace change. Expect the system requirements to change and so design the system to accommodate these changes. So, by simply using the agile methodology, no, you'll be able to address this type of changes. Kasi nga, na-involve mo na si customer eh. There is a prototype, na-evaluate agad yung prototype, nakikita agad ni customer. Okay? Next is maintain simplicity. So, focus on simplicity in both the software being developed and the development process. So, wherever possible, actively work to eliminate complexity from the system. So, ibig sabihin, no, you're not bounded to the processes na meron yung mga traditional plan-driven methodology. So, instead of following itong mga very complex rules na to, pwede nyo i-simplify yung mga tools and processes na gagamitin nyo for the development as long as you produce yung inyong software efficiently. Okay? So, isa rin ito sa trabaho ng project manager, no? Kasi in a development team, meron kayong mga developers, meron kayong mga business analysts, you have your QA, yung nag-head sa kanila will be the project manager. So, usually, ang ginagawa ng project manager is to eliminate itong mga problems na to, no? Alam niyo yun? To eliminate complexity sa pagde-develop ng team. Kung halimbawa, yung team, sabihin na natin, no? Medyo mabagal sila sa ganitong klase ng software development, okay? So, pwedeng gawin ng project manager to import new team na pwedeng tumulong sa kanila, okay? So, etc., etc. So, in Agile, no, it's very important to have simplicity both on the tools and the development or the processes that is being used para sa development ng software. Okay, let's proceed. Next is agile method applicability. So product development, where a software company is developing a small to medium sized product for sale. Okay? So this will be a scenario wherein pwede nyong gamitin or pwedeng magamit yung agile methodology, no? So it could also be used for custom system development within an organization where there is a clear commitment from the customer to become involved in the development process and where there are not a lot of external rules and regulations that affect the software. So katulad nga nung sinabi natin kanina, no, customer involvement is very crucial on the development. So let's say for example, if there is a organization, no, kung sino man yung nagpapagawa ng software within that organization, dapat meron siyang commitment to be involved in the development. Hindi pwedeng papagawa ka lang, okay? So, let's say for example, yung customer nyo, sabihin na natin, yung client nyo, yung boss nyo, okay, is not willing to be involved, most probably, agile methodology is not applicable para sa mga ganong scenario. So because of their focus on small, tightly integrated teams, there are problems in scaling agile methodologies to large systems. So Alam niyo yun, and most probably, no, agile methodologies are applicable for small to medium sized products or small to medium software. Okay, why? Kasi pagdating dito sa agile, no, most of the time, the development team is located in a single physical location wherein they could have informal communication. Let's say, dalawang programmer, tol, tapos na ako dito. So, pwede ko na bang gawin to? Pwede mo bang integrate to for me? Something like that, no? So, ganun yung sa Agile. You're sabihin na natin, located in a physical location. Halimbawa, before mag-start yung trabaho nila, no, magkakaroon sila ng 5-minute na stand-up meeting. Kapag sinabi nating stand-up meeting, as in mabilis lang, 5 minutes. Okay, sasabihin mo doon sa meeting, okay guys, ito yung task ko ngayon, no? Hoping na matatapos ko to. So, once natapos ko to, pwede ko iba to sa inyo by tomorrow. So, okay. So, basically, a stand-up meeting is just a short meeting on providing updates dun sa mga kasama mo kung ano na yung nangyari, ano na yung gagawin mo, ano na yung natapos mo, etc. etc. Next, problems with agile methods. Okay? So, it can be difficult to keep the interest of customer who are involved in the process. Okay? So, ngayon, no, kasi kukunin mo yung involvement ni, ng client mo or ng customer mo. So, every now and then, dapat nandun siya. So, what if yung client mo is a very busy man, no? A very busy CEO. So, mahirap kunin yung interest nung customer na yun para maging involved siya all throughout. Kasi pwedeng every now and then kapag may tatanong yung dev, okay client, kailangan mo ba ng ganito, ganyan? Client, okay na ba to, ganito, ganyan? Kakainin din yung oras nung customer nyo. So, to proceed, no, with agile methodologies, kung ikaw yung nagpapagawa, there should be a commitment from you to be involved from start to finish of the development. Kasi customer involvement is very crucial in the development of software using agile methodology. Team members may be unsuited to the intense involvement that characterizes agile methods, no? So, there is a lot of involvement that is happening dun sa development team na gumagamit ng agile methodology kasi tulad nga ng sinabi ko kanina, they usually do yung mga stand-up meetings. Let's say every day yan. Kayo, the whole development team will be talking, will be, alam niyo yun, communicating with each other. So, if you're a type of person na very, sabihin na natin, unsocial or sabihin na natin medyo introvert, no, you're not into interactions, it will be a very big problem for you if you'll be part of the agile development team. Kasi, uh, intense involvement is needed if you're working in this type of development teams. Next is prioritizing changes can be difficult where there are multiple stakeholders. So, let's say for example, no, if there is one change that this stakeholder, okay, want to change, you still need to consult the other stakeholders. Okay? So, kapag sinabi nating stakeholder, it doesn't necessarily mean na, kapag sinabi pala nating stakeholder, no, these are all the people that is involved dun sa software. So, halimbawa, sabihin na lang natin, yung isang stakeholder, let's say, yung CEO wants the requirements to be changed. Okay? Pero, yung mga nasa baba, yung mga gagamit ng software, hindi yun yung gusto nila. Okay? You need to address muna yung ganong klase ng change. Okay? So, prioritizing change, ano ba ang pa-prioritize mo? Okay? Yung nagpapagawa o yung gagamit. Okay? You need to address that, no? Yung anong klaseng change yung gagawin nyo. Next is contracts may be a problem as with other approaches to iterative development. So, pagdating dito sa contracts, yan yung one of the problem with Agile, no? Hindi mo pwedeng ilagay lahat all throughout dun sa contract. Usually, yung contract nyo, there will be parang segments dyan or portion dyan na if ever the client wants to, alam nyo yun, make changes, it will equate to additional time and money to be used. So, something like that. Laging merong ganun yung mga contracts if agile methodology yung gagamitin nyo. Kasi kung halimbawa, naka-agile kayo, no? Tapos yung contract nyo naka-fix, I don't believe that's agile. Kasi again, no? Agile, okay? nag-accommodate yan ng change. Kung hindi magkakaroon ng change sa contract nyo, that is not agile. Okay? Next, agile methods and software maintenance. So, most organizations spend more on maintaining existing software than they do on new software development. So, if agile methods are to be successful, they have to support maintenance as well as original development. So, meaning, no, yung agile methodology natin is not solely focused on development. So, pwede rin natin i-implement yung agile methodologies in software maintenance. So, kapag sinabi kasi natin software maintenance, no, it doesn't necessarily mean na parang may maintain ka lang ng server, okay, chine-check mo lang yung stability ng server, ng software mo. Kapag sinabi nating maintenance, no, possible na part din dyan yung software evolution wherein you want to add updates dun sa software nyo, you want to remove certain features ng software nyo, so pwede nyo gamitin yung agile ngayon, okay, to do that. But there are two major issues, no, pagdating doon. So, ano ba yan? First is, are systems that are developed using an agile approach maintainable given the emphasis in the development process of minimizing formal documentation? So, let's say for example, the system is already, sabihin na natin, functioning or implemented na yan, no? So, or pwede nating sabihin na on production na yan, ginagamit na yan currently. So, sabi nga natin kanina, pagdating sa Agile, minimal yung documentation. So, kung minimal yung documentation, if the system is already in production and magkakaroon kayo ng update or magkakaroon ng changes, no, will the development team be able to do the change na hindi sila nagre-refer dun sa documentation? That's an issue. So, most probably no. Kasi, kailangan nilang pag-aralan yung software nyo from the ground up. Hihimay-himay nila yan, okay? Pag-aaralan nila, okay? Nang wala silang documentation. Mas madali yan if there is documentation. Okay? That's one issue. The second issue will be, can agile methods be used effectively for evolving a software in response to a customer change request? So, ibig sabihin, no, can we use the agile methodology for evolving the system, or mas applicable ba na instead of upgrading or evolving the system, mag-produce na lang ng bago? Okay? Given na there is no documentation. So, most probably, you can expect na in agile methodology, sabi nga natin na ang focus is more on the working software, not on the documentation. So, kung walang documentation yan, possible ba na magkaroon tayo ng i-update na lang yung lumang system, or mas feasible ba na mag-develop na lang ng bago? Next is, problem may arise if original development cannot be maintained. So, yun yung problema ngayon. So, if the development team, sila pa rin yung mag-upgrade, mag-evolve ng system, most probably, no, madali lang nilang gagawin yan kasi they're the one that developed that software. Paano kung ibang tao na? So, kung ibang tao yung mag-update, mag-evolve ng system, that is a very big problem. Why? Tulad na sinabi ko kanina, pag-aaralan muna nila yung software na yun from the ground up without using a documentation. Kakain ng oras yun. Okay? That will be an issue. Next, plan-driven and agile development. So, the first one is plan-driven. A plan-driven approach to software engineering is based around separate development stages with the outputs to be produced at each of the with outputs to be produced at each of these stages planned in advance. So, not necessarily waterfall model. So, plan-driven, incremental development is also possible. But again, no, it focuses more on what is planned dun sa system, and it could accommodate increments or changes, no? But most probably, it will happen at the latter part na ng development, which, alam yun, which will add additional time and cost. So, iteration occurs within activities. For agile development, specification, design, implementation, and testing are interleaved, and the outputs from the development process are decided through a process of negotiation during the software development process. So, yung process of negotiation dito is basically parang you're providing the client with the prototype, no? Pag-uusapan nyo, is it ito ba yung gustong makita ng client, makikipag-negotiate or makikipag-usap yung development team dun sa client nyo, this is the efficient way na pwede natin gawin. Paano kung di naman alam ni customer what is efficient? Gusto niya lang, gusto ko ganito. Okay? you negotiate that dun sa customer nyo. Ano ba yung mas okay na pwedeng gawin for the software? Okay? Kasi kailangan nyo ipaintindi sa client na if ginawa natin to, this is more efficient, sabihin na natin, less processing speed, less internet yung gagamitin, no? Etc. etc. So, this is a very simple diagram that showcases the difference between plan-driven and agile specification. So, the first one that we have is the plan-based development. So, in here, we have 3 stages, no? So, requirements engineering. So, after requirements engineering, you proceed to requirement specification, okay? Once the requirement specification is finalized, then you can proceed to design and implementation. So, let's say, for example, no, if there is change, sabihin na natin, halimbawa, you're already done with requirements engineering and nandito ka na sa requirement specification. What will happen now if meron kang nakalimutan or if there will be errors dun sa requirements engineering kung nandito ka na sa requirement specification? That's a problem. Why? Tulad ng sinabi natin, no, medyo mahirap accommodate ng change sa plan driven kasi mostly kailangan mo munang tapusin. In this particular diagram, no, kung nandito ka na sa requirement specification and there are change that you want to do, you still need to proceed dun sa design and implementation before you could proceed or you can go back to the requirements engineering. So that's a problem, no? Instead na you're already here, babalik ka na lang, but by following the plan-based development, kailangan mo munang tapusin. Kailangan mo munang magkaroon ng design and implementation before you can proceed to requirements engineering. As compared to agile development, no? So when the first stage or phase will be the requirements engineering, no? So let's say for example, you're in here, requirements engineering, all the requirements are already sabihin na natin identified and described, no? You can now proceed dun sa design and implementation. If there are changes na gusto mong mangyari dun sa requirements engineering, if you're already here in design and implementation, you can easily go back dun sa previous. Kasi dalawa lang naman yan eh. It's just a cycle. Iikot at iikot lang yan. So, once na the design and implementation is done and there are change, babalik ka lang ulit dun sa requirements engineering. Kung ano man yung panibago requirements mo, you could now design and implement or develop. Okay? So, these are the diagrams that we have that showcases very simple ideas regarding the differences between plan-driven and agile specification. Next, we have technical, human, and organizational issues. So most projects include elements of plan-driven and agile process. So deciding on the balance depends on the following. The first one is it important to have a very detailed specification and design before moving to implementation? If so, you probably need to use a plan-driven approach. Okay? So sabi nga natin dito, no, a very detailed specification. Okay? Kapag sinabi natin very detailed specification, no, everything should be written down on the contract. Everything should be written down on the system design document. Okay? So, kung halimbawa, if it's already a detailed specification, no, most probably, you need to use plan-driven approach. The second one will be is an incremental delivery strategy where you deliver the software to customer and get rapid feedback from them realistic. If so, consider using agile methodology. So, let's say for example, your client provided you the commitment. Okay, sabihin na natin to check yung software nyo every 2 weeks or every prototype na na-produce nyo, then pwede kayong gumamit ng agile methodology. But if your client, okay, or your customer, sabihin na natin due to time constraints will not be able to attend yung prototype evaluation, it's best that you just use plan driven. So sa umpisa pa lang, tanungin niyo na si client what are the detailed requirements na kailangan nyo para hindi niya na kailangan bumalik-balik. Ang problema, if hindi niya nagustuhan yung output, ipapabago niya yung kabuuan ng software. As compared to agile, no, kung involved yung customer, every step of the development, nakikita niya, monitor niya, na-assure niya na tama. So, hindi kayo magkakaroon ng problema at the end. Next is how large is the system that is being developed. So agile methods are most effective when the systems can be developed with a small co-located team. So ibig sabihin, no, your development team is located in a single physical location who can communicate informally. This may not be possible for large systems that require larger development teams, so a plan-driven approach may have to be used. So the general rule that we can use, no, in the assumption when to use yung agile versus plan driven, no, if you're working on a small to medium software, no, it is best to use the agile. If you'll be working a very large software that involves multiple teams, multiple disciplines, it is highly suggestible just to use the plan driven. Next, what type of system is being developed? So plan-driven approaches may be required for systems that require a lot of analysis before implementation. So for example, will be real-time system and complex timing requirements. Okay? So next is what is the expected system lifetime? So long lifetime systems may require more design documentation to communicate the original intentions of the system developers to the support team. So let's say for example, no, if the software sabihin na natin is intended to be used for sabihin na natin around 10 years, it is best, no, sabihin na natin na to provide documentation. Okay? So why? Kasi sabihin na natin within the span of 10 years nandun pa ba yung development team sa company na yon, or sabihin na natin na buhay pa ba yung nag-develop ng software nyo? Para if there will be new people that will be using that software within that 10-year period, okay, hindi nila kailangan hanapin yung mga tao na nag-develop. Just refer to the documentation. So, what technologies are available to support system development? So, agile methods rely on good tools to keep track of an evolving design. So, katulad ng sinabi natin kanina, no, the technologies, the tools, the processes, nasa development team yan kung naka-agile sila, kung anong klaseng tools, processes, or technologies ang gagamitin nila for the development of the software. So, how is the development team organized? If the development team is distributed or if part of the development team is being outsourced, kapag sinabi natin outsource, no, they're not, sabihin na natin, technically part of the organization, ibig sabihin, yung mga tao will be just, parang alam yon, by contract lang sila, no? You may need to develop design documents to communicate across the development teams. So, tulad nga ng sinabi natin kanina, no, one of the requirements in implementing agile methodology in the development of a particular software will be the developer should be co-located in a single location. So, they could have a very informal communication na every updates that happens during the development, hindi mo na kailangan i-email, okay? Hindi mo na kailangan gawa ng documentation, madali na sabihin mo na lang yung katabi mo, okay, pre, tapos na ako dito sa module na to. Test mo na ba o proceed na ako doon sa next module? Alam niyo yun, it's as easy as that. Instead of mag-email ka ng documentation, waiting for the respond, after sabihin na natin few hours or few days, no, mas madali if you're co-located in a single location. Kapag you have questions, kaya agad sagutin ng project manager mo o nung ka-team mo. Next, are there cultural or organizational issues that may affect the system development? So, traditional engineering organizations have a culture of plan-based development, as this is the norm in engineering. Okay, so let's say for example, within your organizational, sabihin na natin, or within the business organization or organization nagpapagawa ng software, gumagawa ng software, no, you need to check if there will be issues, whether it's cultural or organizational. Let's say, it's as simple as yung development team mo ba magkakasundo. Okay? So, team building is very crucial for development teams na gumagamit ng ng agile. Why? Kailangan in sync kasi kayo. Okay? So, it's as easy as you need to collaborate easily within your team members para mas madali yung matapos. Okay? Hindi pwede kasi in a development team that uses an agile, hindi pwede nag-aaway-away yung mga group members kasi hindi sila, or nung team members, kasi hindi kayo basta-basta matatapos. Kailangan you're in sync, no? Kung ano yung ginagawa ng isa, kino-complement ng isa, hindi kino-kontra nung ka-team mo. Okay? So, how good are the designers and the programmers in the development team? It is sometimes argued that agile methods require higher skill levels than a plan-based approaches in which programmers simply translate a detailed design into code. So, pagdating nga dito sa agile, no, they have the ability to use whatever technologies, tools ang pwede nilang gamitin, no? So, let's say for example, as compared to plan-driven wherein, okay, ito lang ang gagawin mo, convert mo to sa ganito, ito lang ang gagamitin mo. Yan lang. So, possibly, yung development team, halimbawa, yung programmer, Java lang yung alam niya, pwede yan sa plan-driven. Kasi sasabihin niya, ang sabi ni client, gagamitin natin Java. Pagdating dito sa Agile, no, bahala ka. Sabihin na natin, okay, programmer 1, gawin mo itong module na to. Okay. Pwede kayo magkasundo ng development team. Guys, ganito na lang. Dito na lang natin gawin. Mas madali dito. Ito yung technology na gamitin natin. Okay? So, sabi nga nila, no, it is argued that agile development teams require higher skills. Kasi they have, sabihin na natin, the privilege to use different types of tools and methodologies. Next is the system subject to external regulation? So, if a system has to be approved by external regulator, for example, FAA approved software that is critical in the operation of an aircraft, then you will probably require to produce detailed documentation. So, if a detailed documentation, sabihin na natin, is required dun sa development or dun sa production ng inyong software, it is highly suggestible that you use plan-driven. Next, we have XP. So, XP simply refers to extreme programming. So, perhaps the best known and most widely used agile method. So, extreme programming or XP takes an extreme approach to iterative development. So, new versions may be built several times per day. So, let's say, any update, integrate dun sa prototype, test it. Okay? The increments are delivered to customers every 2 weeks. So, pagdating dun sa Scrum, or dun sa isa pang example ng Agile methodology, no, etong 2 weeks na to, tinatawag natin na sprint. So, during a sprint, the development team will produce a prototype, a working software within that 2 weeks. So, after that 2 weeks, no, kapag nakapag-produce na sila ng prototype nila, that prototype will now then be evaluated by the customer. So, i-check yan. Okay. Sprint 1, ito yung prototype natin. Check ni client. Ito yung feedback ni client. Kunin yung feedback ni client. Proceed tayo dun sa sprint 2. Produce ng prototype. Then, uulit-ulit lang yung process. Next is all tests must be run for every build. And the build is only accepted if test runs are successful. Ibig sabihin, no? If you already produce your prototype, no, initially, the development team, before you proceed dun sa presentation nyo with the client, you need to perform test muna. Every build or every prototype should be tested before ipakita yan sa client nyo, just to make sure na tama yung nagawa nyo on your, sabihin na natin, no, you can check on your own muna. Check mo muna sa sarili mo or on the development team whether it's correct. If it's not correct, okay, wag mo muna papakita doon sa client mo kasi yun nga, mali. May mali doon sa test or may mali doon sa na-produce nyo. XP and Agile principle. So, incremental development is supported through small frequent system releases. Itong releases na binabanggit natin na to, no, or yung mga build na binabanggit natin na to, also just refers to a prototype. So, customer involvement means full-time customer engagement with the team. So, katulad nung sinabi natin kanina, in Agile, no, it's regardless whether it's extreme programming, time boxing, Scrum, very crucial yung customer involvement. Kasi si customer ang mag-check, magbibigay ng go signal if the software or yung prototype nyo is already correct and you can proceed na dun sa next step. Siya lang yung pwedeng mag-provide sa inyo no go signal. So, people, not process, through pair programming and the process that avoids long working hours. kapag sinabi nating pair programming, no, pwedeng dalawang programmer yung nagtatrabaho, sabihin na natin on this side, sabihin na natin on the back end. Dalawang programmer yung nagtatrabaho, pwede simultaneously or sabihin na natin na by schedule. Kung pag simultaneously, sabay sila nagde-develop dun sa back end. Okay? Kung by schedule naman sila, pwedeng yung may pang umaga, may pang gabi, but they're working on a single project or pwede rin na they're working on the same module. It's either sabay. The idea is there are two or more team members working on a, sabihin na natin, single part of the software. Whether simultaneously or, alam nyo yun, by schedule. So, change supported through regular system releases. So, yun nga, no? Every 2 weeks, nagpo-produce kayo ng prototype. Kapag merong bago, or there is change on the requirements, you can now address that on the next sprint. Hindi kailangan tapusin yung development before mag-proceed dun sa change. Next is maintaining simplicity through constant refactoring of code. So, basically, no, if you could eliminate complexity within the code, if you can simplify and minimize kung ano man yung content ng code nyo, that, alam nyo yun, that could increase the efficiency and the performance, madali nyo magagawa. Kasi, you're performing test, tawag dito, lagi kayo nagpa-perform ng test. Okay? Next, the extreme programming release cycles. So here is a simple diagram that will be showcasing you what are the different phases or activities that is involved in extreme programming. So the first one is select user stories for this release. Kapag sinabi natin user stories, these are basically para user requirements na hinihingi ng client mo. Okay? It can come in a paragraph form wherein sasabihin ng client, ito yung gagawin nyo, ito yung kailangan nyo. Okay. Once those stories are already available, the development team will break down those stories to task. Okay? Kasi nga, you have the development team, you have multiple members, kailangan yung paghati-hatian yan into task. So, once na yung task is already planned out and they're distributed dito sa mga tao na to, okay, you can now plan the release. So, in planning the release, no, kukunin nyo lahat ng mga task, ipaprioritize nyo kung ano yung mga task na kailangan nyo ma-develop dun sa 2 weeks or dun sa sprint nyo. So, once that the plan is okay and pwede na kayo mag-start, you proceed dun sa development, integration, and testing ng software. Okay? So, once na nakapag-develop na, nakapag-integrate na ng iba't ibang mga modules, na-test nyo na rin, you can now release the software para dun sa client, para makita ni client. So, kapag ni-release nyo na yan, ang gagawin ngayon ni client is evaluate the system. Okay? So, kapag na-evaluate na yung system, magpuproceed na naman si client doon sa panibagong stories. Whether i-update niya kung ano na yung na-release or magpuproceed na kayo dun sa ibang parts. So, ulit-ulit lang siya. Okay? Kaya siya tinatawag na iterative, no? Paulit-ulit lang yung mga step natin. Until magkaroon kayo ng final product. Extreme programming practices. So, the first one is incremental planning. So, requirements are recorded on story cards and the stories to be included in a release are determined by the time available and their relative priority. So, meron tayong binabanggit dito na priority. Ngayon, no, ipa-prioritize ng client ano ba yung gusto niyang unang makita doon sa initial release or doon sa initial prototype. So, yung mga stories na yan, no, will be labeled whether they're urgent or pwedeng malate ng konti. Okay? So, kung urgent yan, mas mataas yung priority. Okay? Next is small releases. The minimal useful set of functionality that provides business value is developed first. A prototype. Releases of the system are frequent and incrementally add functionality to the first release. Next is simple design. Enough design is carried out to meet the current requirements and no more. So, kung ano lang yung hinihingi ng client nyo, yun lang yung ipoproduce nyo. Okay? It doesn't necessarily mean na yung prototype nyo is napakaganda na ng user interface, no? Pwedeng you can focus more on the functionality instead of the aesthetics. Next is first development. So an automated unit test framework is used to write tests for a new piece of functionality before that functionality itself is implemented. So in here, no, yung pagte-test ngayon, no, it is highly suggested that you use an automated unit test framework. So ano ba 'yon? So basically, pwede kayong gumamit ng mga softwares na pwedeng mag-implement or pwedeng gumawa ng test on your behalf. Dito sa mga software na to, no, pwede nyong i-code or pwede kayong gumawa ng mga instances na kapag itong software na ginawa nyo, mag-i-input siya ng ganito, iti-test niya yung software. So, automated. Kasi halimbawa, you'll be testing your application ng 500 times, no? Parang ang tagal. Why not gumawa ka na lang ng yung mga test cases na pwede mong implement dito sa mga unit test framework na to. Para pwede mong i-run ng mabilisan, pwede mong i-run ng automated yung mga test mo. Refactoring. All developers are expected to refactor the code continuously as soon as possible code improvements are found. So this keeps the code simple and maintainable. So sabi nga natin kanina, no, simplicity, removing complexity pagdating dun sa code nyo. Pwede nyong ma-improve to mas efficient yung code nyo, mas okay. Next is pair programming. Developers work in pairs, checking each other's work and providing support to always do a good job. So kapag pair programming, no, two or more people work on a single, sabihin natin part of the system. Kung halimbawa, you're working on the graphics, so hindi lang isang tao yan, pwedeng magko-collaborate yan, 2 tao, 3 tao working at the same time or working on at the same time or working on a scheduled time. But they're working on a single part ng software nyo. Collective ownership. The pairs of developers work on all areas of the system so that no island of expertise develop and all the developers take responsibility of the code. Anyone can change anything. So pagdating dun sa collective ownership, no, anyone on the development team, pwedeng sabihin niya, okay guys, ako nang gagawa nito. Okay, kabila, ako naman nang gagawa nito. Pwede silang mag-exchange. Okay, halimbawa, nahihirapan ako. Pwede ka magpatulong sa kasama mo or siya yung gumawa doon. The idea in here is hindi lang isang tao yung nagde-develop. Anything that happens sa development, pwedeng gawin ng tao na yan, pwedeng gawin ng tao na to. And if there are faults or if there are errors, no, hindi kayo pwede mag-pinpoint ng isang tao. Yung kabuuan ng team ang may problema. Continuous integration. So as soon as the work on a task is complete, it is integrated into the whole system. After such integration, all the unit tests in the system must pass. So, yun nga, no? Yung system is being developed by different people. Okay? Kapag ikaw, programmer 1, natapos mo itong module na to, programmer 2, natapos mo itong module na to, okay? Kailangan yung integrate, kailangan yung pagsamahin yung dalawang module na yun para mabuo nyo yung system. So, every modules that are being finished or every, sabihin na natin, functionality being finished, kailangan yung i-integrate dun sa kabuuan ng software. Okay? Next is sustainable pace. Large amount of overtime are not considered acceptable as the net effect is often to reduce code quality and medium-term productivity. Okay? So, in terms of sustainable pace, no? So, dahil you're working in sprints, nakaplano naman kung ano yung gagawin nyo. Okay? It's up to the development team gaano sila kabilis mag-develop. Can they follow the initial plan wherein there are breakdowns of activities or tasks yung ginagawa nila. Doon sa naka-breakdown, naka-list, ito lang yung gagawin. Gaano kabilis ba sila? Can they sustain that pace? Okay? As compared dun sa if sabihin natin, ikukumpara natin yun doon sa length ng development. Okay? On-site customer. So, a representative of the end user of the system, or which is the customer or the client, should be available full-time for the use of the XP team. So, in an extreme programming process, the customer is a member of the development team and is responsible for bringing system requirements to the team for implementation. So, katulad ng sinabi natin kanina, no, in Agile, okay, kasi ganito yan guys ha, in Agile, it's an umbrella term. Under Agile, there are different agile methodologies. Ang isang example nun is extreme programming, another example nun is time boxing, another example nun is Scrum, no? Sa lahat ng mga yon, okay, a customer is needed. Kasi siya nga yung nag-evaluate, siya yung nagbibigay ng mga requirements na gagawin ng development team doon sa prototype. Next, requirement scenarios. So, in XP, a customer or user is part of the XP team and is responsible for making decisions on requirements. Okay? So, customer or representative ng customer. Okay? Siya yung tawag dito, siya yung siya yung nagde-decide. Okay? For what type of requirements are included dun sa next na release nyo, ano yung hindi included, siya rin nagpa-prioritize whether ito ba yung uunahin or ito ba yung pinakahuling i-develop. So, user requirements are expressed as scenarios or user stories. So, these are written on cards and the development team break down them into implementation tasks. These tasks are the basis of the schedule and cost estimates. So, kumbaga, tulad ng sinabi natin kanina, no? Etong mga user stories na to are basically yung requirements na hinihingi ng mga users. Sasabihin niya, "Oh, ito yung hinihingi ko. Ganito, ganyan. Dapat kapag pinindot ko to, ito 'yan." Okay? Ngayon, yung development team, kung ano man yung mga user story na yon, okay, i-develop nila or i-breakdown nila yan into task. Yung mga task na yan yung ma-assign or yan yung kukunin ng mga development team para i-develop nila. So, pagdating sa XP, pati sa Scrum, no, nakalist lang lahat yung mga task na yan per priority. Tapos, yung mga development team, pumipili lang sila kung ano yung gagawin nila. Okay, kapag napili niya yan, gagawin niya. Kapag natapos na, pipili ulit siya ng task. Ganon. Next, the customer chooses the stories for inclusion in the next release based on their priorities and the schedule estimates. So in here, this is an example of a prescribing medication story. As you can see, or as I've mentioned earlier, no, in this particular example, this comes into paragraph form. Here, the client will be creating a description kung ano ba yung gusto niya mangyari dun sa system. So let's say, halimbawa, ito, no? If you select current medication, you will be asked to check the dose. If you wish to change the dose, enter the new dose, then confirm the prescription. So, nagpo-provide siya dito ng detailed na description kung ano yung gagawin ng software. So, ngayon, yung development team ngayon, pwede niyang i-divide yan into several tasks na pwedeng gawin. Halimbawa, change dose prescribed drug, task 1. Task 2, formulary selection. Task 3, dose checking. So, dito, yung stories na to kanina, i-divide nila yan into several tasks na pwedeng paghati-hatian ng development team para mabuo nila ngayon yung software. Next, XP and change. So, conventional wisdom in software engineering is to design for change. It is worth spending time and effort anticipating change as this reduces cost later in the life cycle. So, XP, however, maintains that this is not worthwhile as changes cannot be reliably anticipated. So, rather, it proposes constant code improvement or refactoring to make changes easier when they have to be implemented. So, again, no, it's easier to address change if you'll be using iterative type of software development such as agile methodology. So, wherein you can already address the change as soon as it occurs instead na dun sa latter part. Okay? Kasi on the latter part, mas malaki na bubuo nyo, mas malaki yung change na pwede mangyari. Okay? So, if nando sa latter part, yung pag-address yun ng change, marami yung possible na maging effect. Kasi pwedeng maging domino effect yan. Kapag may binago ka dun sa isa, alam nyo naman yan if you're working on a code, no? Kapag meron kang binago dito sa isang source code mo, pwedeng magkaroon ng domino effect yan sa kabuuan ng software. So, mas maganda dun sa module pa lang, if there are changes, address yun na dun para hindi na magkaroon ng domino effect dun sa huli. Key points. Agile methods are incremental development methods that focus on rapid development. Frequent release of the software, reducing process overheads, and producing high-quality code. They involve the customer directly in the development process. The decision on whether to use an agile or plan-driven approach to development should depend on the type of software being developed and the capabilities of the development team and the culture of the company. Ito yung mga situations na binanggit natin kanina or scenarios na binanggit natin kanina, no? Let's say for example, if you're working with small to medium softwares, no, it is highly suggested to use plan-driven. If in development team is not located or outsourced lang, it is suggested na use plan-driven. Extreme programming is a well-known agile method that integrates a range of good programming practices such as a frequent release of software, continuous software improvement, and customer participation in the development. So mostly, no, the ideas for the extreme programming and the different agile methodologies under the agile umbrella will have the same idea. Okay, produce the prototype, have the prototype checked by the customer. Okay, then customer feedback from that evaluation will be used to improve the software. Okay guys, for the next part of our chapter 3, no, let's proceed with lecture 2. So testing in XP. Testing is central to XP, and XP has developed an approach where the program is tested after every change has been made. So XP testing features the following. First is test first development. So, kapag sinabi natin test first, no, before you proceed dun sa actual development, no, you're already creating the test cases that you want to, alam mo yun, you want to test the software with. So, incremental test development from scenarios. Okay? So, incremental test development will be, let's say for example, dun sa test cases na ginawa mo, okay, you encounter that there is problem in this part of the software, you can now use those scenarios, no, to provide incremental test or even incremental developments ng software na ginawa nyo. User involvement in test development and validation. Again, no, as we've mentioned earlier, so in XP, yung client nyo or yung customer nyo is part of the development team. He or she will be the one na magpo-provide ng feedbacks dun sa mga test development or dun sa test validation na ipa-perform ng team dun sa prototype. Automated test harnesses are used to run all components test each time that a new release is built, no? So tulad ng sinabi natin kanina, you'll be using an automated framework that will be able to do the testing on your behalf. So, hindi naman kailangan na lahat ng testing is gagawin isa-isa ng QA nyo, no? Pwede naman kayong gumamit ng mga automated na frameworks to do the testing para mas mabilis. Test first development, writing tests before code clarifies the requirements to be implemented, no? So, itong mga test na to will be, sabihin na natin, test cases. These are basically scenarios that you want to happen to the software to check whether the software runs on specification. So, ibig sabihin, if tama ba yung pag-run ng system na dinevelop nyo. So, tests are written as programs rather than data so they can be executed automatically. So, the test includes a check that that has executed correctly. So, usually relies on testing frameworks such as Junit. Itong Junit na to is an example of framework that you can use for testing. Okay, so maraming types of frameworks or softwares na pwede nyo gamitin for automated testing. So, all previous and new tests are run automatically with new functionalities is added. So, thus checking that the new functionality has not introduced errors. Okay, so halimbawa, no, you're finished creating this module, integrate nyo na yun sa system, you run ngayon yung automated test nyo to check whether itong module na to, kung i-integrate nyo ba, hindi siya magkakaroon ng error, hindi ba siya magpuproduce ng error dun sa kabilang mga modules. Next, customer involvement. So, as I've mentioned earlier, no, customer involvement is very crucial in XP. So, the role of the customer in testing process is to help develop acceptance tests for the stories that are to be implemented in the next release. So, basically, no, ang gagawin ng customer dito is magsaset siya ngayon ng mga requirements. Ano ba yung kailangan na i-perform ng software na to? Ano ba yung kailangan meron itong software na to to be able to be accepted by the customer? So, the customer who is part of the team writes tests as development proceeds. All new code is therefore validated to ensure that the what that is Excuse me, no? So all code is therefore validated to ensure that it is what the customer needs. So in here, no, katulad ng sinabi natin kanina, the customer is already part of the development team. So aside from testing, he or she will also be creating the test cases, okay? Para dun sa software before proceeding dun sa development. So, however, people adopting the customer role have limited time available and so cannot work full-time with the development team. They may feel that providing the requirements was enough of a contribution, so they may be reluctant to get involved in the testing process. So, most probably, no, if the customer is not able to attend yung mga duties na hinihingi for extreme programming, what he or she can do will be just to provide, sabihin na natin, a representative na puwedeng tanungin, puwedeng mag-provide nung, responsibilities na kailangan ng development team in extreme programming. Okay? Or if wala talaga, puwedeng mag-stand on the client, sabihin na natin, shoe, yung tinatawag natin na business analyst. So business analyst will most probably ask all the questions prior hand dun kay customer para makita niya yung point of view and makita niya yung mga requirements na hihingin ng client. Okay, so pwedeng business analyst. But what's important in here is the client or the customer is represented dun sa development. So test case description for those checking, no? So halimbawa, ito sample ng test case natin. So for the input, a number in mg representing milligram representing a single dose of the drug. So a number of representing the number of single dose. Okay, so ibig sabihin for this test case you need two numerical values. Okay? Number of dose or number of milligrams per dose and the number of dose per day. So these are the tests that you want to perform. So test for inputs where the single dose is correct but the frequency is too high. So test number 2, test for inputs where the single dose is too high and too low. So test for inputs where the single dose or the frequency is too high or too low. Yung fourth test natin will be to test for inputs where single dose frequency is in the percentage range. So the output will be either okay, or error message indicating that the dose is outside of the safe range. This will be an example of the test case na pwedeng i-provide nung development team or pwede rin i-create nung representative ng customer para alam niyo yun, they could check whether the software performs in specification nung hinihingi ng client. Test automation. So, test automation means that the tests are written as executable components before the task is implemented. So, this testing component should be standalone, should simulate the submission of input to be tested, and should check that the result meets the output specification. An automated test framework such as Junit is a system that makes it easy to write executable tests and submit a set of tests for execution. So, halimbawa in test automation, yung gagawin niyan is basically yung mga test na gagawin nyo, ipa-perform niya yan ng mabilis and multiple times. Halimbawa, sabihin na natin, you're creating test case katulad nito kanina. Okay, ayan yung mga test. Instead of you doing this test every release, why not gumamit ka na lang ng framework na pwede mong i-automate ito? Halimbawa, iti-test mo ito ng 100 times. I-check mo ngayon kung nag-okay ba siya or nag-error siya within that 100 times. Ang dami, di ba? So, that will be 4 questions. Yung kabuuan ng test case mo times 100, that will be 400 tests. It will take a lot of time if mano-mano, if manual yung test na gagawin mo. Especially if one person is isang tao lang yung mag-work on this test case, no? Napakatagal nun. It's very time consuming. Why not just use tools such as yung mga binanggit dito na Junit wherein pwede mo namang i-automate yung testing. Wherein, i-write mo to into, sabihin na natin, scenarios or configurations na sa software. Then, si software na yung automatic na pwedeng mag-provide or mag-create ng test na to and ipoprovide nyo na lang sa'yo kung ano yung naging result. Mas madali. As testing is automated, there's always a set of tests that can quickly and easily executed. Whenever any functionality is added to the system, the test can be run and problems that the new code has introduced can be immediately caught. So, ayun no, as testing is automated, there is always a set of tests that can quickly and easily executed. So, yung mga examples ng quickly and easily executed will be ganitong klaseng test cases wherein nag-i-input ka lang yung mga numerical values, then i-check niya lang whether the output is okay or error. So, minsan kasi there are type of tests na parang more on the behavioral side wherein kapag sinelect mo to, kinlik mo to, hindi mo to pinindot, what will happen? Ito kasi inputs eh. Magpo-provide ka lang ng two numbers, i-enter mo, ganun lang yung test na ipaperform. Next, XP testing difficulties. So, programmers prefer programming to testing, and sometimes they take shortcuts when writing tests. For example, they may write incomplete tests that do not check for all possible exceptions that may occur. So, testing is very crucial in a software, no? So, dito sa testing na to, dapat makover nyo ano ba lahat ng mga pwedeng gawin ng customer. Ano ba lahat yung pwedeng i-input ng customer nyo. Parang kailangan nyo lahat ma-anticipate what will be the possible scenarios that may introduce errors to software na ginagawa nyo. So, once na you have isolated these scenarios, once you've isolated these inputs, no, pwede mo na ngayon i-check alin yung may problema dun sa software or finished product na ba yung software nyo if it all passed lahat ng mga test cases na meron kayo. The catch lang is, ayun nga, kailangan nyo ma-anticipate lahat-lahat. Okay? So, some tests can be very difficult and to write incrementally. So, for example, in a complex user interface, it is often difficult to write unit tests for the code that implements the display logic and workflow between screens. So, ito yung mga binabanggit natin kanina na type of test case na more on behavioral, no? So, hindi ito parang mga simple and casual test cases na parang numbers lang, i-check mo lang it's okay or if it's error. So, halimbawa, in display logic, tama ba yung sequence sa pagkakasunod-sunod ng mga dinidisplay na output, etc., etc. It is difficult to judge the completeness of a set of tests. Although you may have a lot of system test, your test may not provide complete coverage. So, sabi nga natin kanina, no, you have to anticipate every scenarios na yung, ano ba yung mga scenarios na pwedeng gawin ng customer dun sa software mo. Kailangan mong ma-anticipate lahat yon. Ang problema lang is mahirap i-measure whether yung mga test mo ba already covered all the possible scenarios. Okay? So, pwede magkaroon kayo ng incremental na testing. So, once na natapos yung testing nyo, evaluate nyo ulit yung mga test cases nyo, then create again yung or proceed again dun sa next test. Pair programming. So, in XP or Extreme Programmer or Extreme Programming, no, programmers work in pairs, sitting together to develop a code. This helps develop common ownership of code and spread knowledge across the team. So, let's say for example, no, if one programmer, hindi siya masyadong familiar dito, pwedeng gawin ng isa yan, pwede niya ituro sa kanya. Okay, ito yung gagawin natin, ganito, ganyan. Okay. So, it also serves as an informal review process, as each line of code is looked by one or by more than one person. So, sabi nga nila, the more eyes that sees yung code nyo, mas madali nyo ma-identify whether it's correct or not. Or whether the code will have rooms for improvement or you can improve the efficiency ng code. Kasi hindi lang ikaw yung nakakakita. There are other people that works on that code and pwede nyo makita na, uy, may mali dito, uy, may kulang dito. Okay? It encourages refactoring as the whole team can benefit from this. So basically, kapag nakita ng isa na we can, alam yun, we can still improve itong part ng code na to, pwede nyo siyang i-improve para mas maging efficient yung code nyo. Pwede nyo i-refactor lahat para ma-take nyo yung advantage ng mas efficient yung output nyo. So, measurements suggest that development productivity with pair programming is similar to that of two people working independently. Okay? So, mas okay if it's in pair programming kasi pwede nyo paghatian, sabay nyong ginagawa yung isang module na meron kang part, dito may part ka doon. Okay? So, in pair programming, programmers sit together at the same workstation to develop the software. So, possible na yung workstation will be a single computer or sabihin na natin you're working on a single location, working at the same time. So, pairs are created dynamically so that all team members work with each other during the development process. So, katulad ng binanggit natin kanina, no, yung mga tasks na yan are available for the development team and pumipili sila ngayon kung ano yung mga tasks na gagawin nila. So, kung halimbawa itong task na to, pinili mo, yung task na kasama, pinili mo, and you're working on the same module, mag-work kayo doon. So, kaya sabi nga natin kanina, it's important that you have synchronization, in sync kayo. So, kung halimbawa, nag-proceed ka dun sa next, iba na naman yung nakatrabaho mo, dapat in sync pa rin kayo. That's why team building is very crucial para dito sa mga development teams na to. The sharing of knowledge that happens during pair programming is very important as it reduces the overall risk to a project when the team members leave. So, let's say for example, no, if all of the development team members are knowledgeable on all aspect of the development ng software na yan, may umalis dyan na isa sa inyo, pwedeng may mag-cover pa rin sa kanya kasi hindi nila na-monopolize yung idea or the specialization sa certain part. So, dapat lahat ng team members ng development team are capable and skilled enough to perform kung ano man yung task na maiiwan kapag meron sabihin na natin umalis na sa development team or there will be issues encountered along the way wherein one or more team members will not be able to attend yung kanilang mga duties and responsibilities. Pair programming is not necessarily inefficient and there is evidence that a pair working together is more efficient than two programmers working separately. So, one of the advantage nga, no, kanina sinabi nga natin, parang one level of tawag dito, review process wherein pwedeng i-check nung kabila kung ano man yung ginagawa mo kasi they're also seeing what you're doing and seeing what will be your output. Advantages of pair programming, no? So, it supports the idea of collective ownership and responsibility for the system. So, individuals are not held responsible for problems with the code. So, if ever there will be problems sa code, hindi sisisihin kung sino yung isang tao lang na yon, no? So, instead, the team has collective responsibility. So, ibig sabihin, yung kabuuan ng team, yung may responsibility dun sa error na yon. Why? Kasi nakikita naman yan eh. Nakikita ng buong team. Okay, kung hindi nakita ng isa, dapat nakita ng kabila. Kasi, alam niyo yun, involved naman lahat. Nandun lahat sila sa process ng development. Kung hindi nakita ng isa, dapat makita ng iba. Kung hindi nakita ng iba, dun kabuuan ng team. Hindi mo pwedeng isipin yung isang tao. Isisihin yung isang tao. Okay? It acts as an informal review process because each line of code is looked by at least two people. So, tulad nung sinabi natin kanina, no, nakikita ng mga ka-team mo kung ano yung ginagawa mo dun sa code. If there are problems, palagay nila, pwede nilang ma-spot agad kung ano yung error, pwede nyo matama agad kung ano yung error na yun. It helps support refactoring, which is the process of software improvement. So, where pair programming and collective ownership are used, others benefit immediately from the refactoring, so they're likely to support the process. So, ayun nga, no, if there will be at least two people working on that and nakita ng isang tao na merong mali, okay, pwede nyo na ngayong i-address yun, i-correct yun to improve the system or improve the software or even improve the code na meron kayo. Agile project management. So for agile project management, no, so the principal responsibility of software project managers is to manage the project so that the software is delivered on time and within the planned budget for the project. So as I mentioned earlier, no, in the development team, the head of the development team will be the project manager. So the responsibility of the project manager will be to remove all the hindrances that will be experienced by the development team, okay, para makapag-provide sila ng software within the time period, okay, and the planned budget na sinet nung client nyo. Okay? Kung halimbawa si client wala naman siyang binabago dun sa requirements, no, dapat the project manager, okay, will assure the client na if ito ang pinag-usapan, wala namang binabago sa requirements, dapat ma-deliver siya dun sa date na pinag-usapan. The standard approach to project management is plan-driven. So, managers draw up a plan for the project showing what should be delivered, when it should be delivered, and who will work on the development of the project deliverables. So, kapag sinabi natin project deliverables will be ano ba yung output na ina-expect natin. So, kung it's software development, no, most probably the project deliverable will be the product itself, the software itself. So, the project manager keeps a tab wherein pwede niyang i-check kung when is the deadline, okay? What are the requirements that was asked by the customer? Sino yung nagde-develop ng mga requirements na to? Okay? And can they be delivered on time? So, agile project management requires a different approach which is adapted to incremental development and the particular strengths of agile methods. So, Scrum. So, dito, no, guys, as I mentioned earlier, Scrum is one of the software methodologies under the Agile umbrella. So, Agile umbrella is basically a collective term that describes the different software methodologies that uses iterative processes. So one of the examples of the agile methodology aside from XP or extreme programming is Scrum. So the Scrum approach is a general agile method but its focus is on managing iterative development rather than specific agile practices. So these are the three phases in the Scrum. So the first one will be the initial phase is an outline planning phase where you establish the general objectives for the project and design the software architecture. The second phase will be this is followed by a series of sprint cycles where each cycle develops an increment of the system. So as I've mentioned earlier, no, a sprint is basically a certain period, usually it's around 2 weeks. That certain period, no, the development team should be able to produce the prototype. Have the prototype checked by or evaluated by the customer. The feedbacks will be used to update, develop yung next na prototype, then another sprint cycle na naman yon. The sprint cycle or the duration of sprint cycle may sabihin na natin no, may change depending on the project manager. So, let's say the project manager and the development team decided that the sprint cycle will last for 3 weeks or 2 weeks. It's up to them, no? But what's important is a sprint will be a certain period of time that is used to develop your prototype. The project closure phase will be the third one that wraps up the project, completes required documentation such as a system help frames and user manuals, and assesses the lessons learned from the project. Excuse me. So here is a very simple diagram that showcases how the Scrum process works. So the first one will be to outline the planning and architectural design. Now, what's next will be to assess, select, develop, and review the software. So let's say, for example, you'll be assessing what are the requirements that were outlined in the planning and architectural design, select what will be the priority out of all of those tasks, develop those tasks, and review whether the tasks are well implemented and integrated into a system prototype. Okay, so once the prototype is already finished, no, or once the prototype is already uh, produced, again, no, you assess is the prototype or does the prototype correctly works. Okay, so if it's yes, again, no, you'll select the remaining task, develop it, review, etc., etc. This will become a cycle up until project closure, wherein the project or the final output is already finished. For the sprint cycle, sprints are fixed in length, normally 2 to 4 weeks. They correspond to the development of a release of the system in XP. So the starting point for planning is the product backlog, which is a list of work to be done on the project. So basically, a product backlog is a repository of all the tasks that the development team will have to perform. So let's say, for example, no, a collection of um, a collection of these task cards will be your project backlog. So the backlog will have all the tasks that will be required to develop the software. So it could be hundreds of tasks or even thousands of tasks depending on how large the software that is being developed is. Next is the selection phase involves all the project team who work with the customer to select the features and functionality to develop during the sprint. Okay, so usually this task or activities within the product backlog are already identified whether they are urgent or not. So it's already identified by the customer which task will be prioritized or which features will be prioritized by the development team to develop. Once these are agreed, the team organizes themselves to develop the software. During this stage, the team is isolated from the customer and the organization with all communications channeled through the so-called Scrum Master. So, in other um, software methodologies, the counterpart of the project manager will be the Scrum Master. The Scrum Master and the project manager will basically have the same task. It will be to remove all the impediments that the development team can encounter and to assure that the products or the final product will be delivered on time and on specification. The role of Scrum Master is to protect the development team from external distractions, no? Whether it's technological distractions, personal distractions, etc., etc. At the end of the sprint, the work done is reviewed and presented to the stakeholders. The next sprint cycle then begins. Teamwork in Scrum. So the Scrum Master is a facilitator who arranges daily meetings, tracks the backlog of work to be done, records decision, measures progress against the backlog, and communicates the customer and the management outside team. So the Scrum Master basically works as the team manager or the project manager that oversees everything that happens within the development of the software. The whole team attends short daily meetings where all team members share information, describe their progress since the last meeting, problems they have arisen, and what is planned for the following days. Ito yung binabanggit ko kanina na stand-up meeting. It could be a 5-minute stand-up meeting. Okay? So, it's a very short meeting wherein all the development team members provides all the information on the activities they currently done, or currently doing, what are the activities that they have already done, and what are the tasks they're still not finished with. Scrum benefits. So the product is broken down into a set of manageable and understandable chunks. So unstable requirements do not hold up progress. So basically in here, no, all the requirements that are being asked, or all the requirements that was provided by the client will be broken down into chunks or even modules. Okay? Those modules can be broken down or uh, can be broke down into several pieces to particular task. So the whole team have visibility of everything and consequently team communication is improved. So all the team members are able to see what will be the progress of the team because there will be um it's alam yun, parang meron kayong you can see the progress by checking the backlog. Wherein sabi nga natin kanina, no, the backlog is a collection of all the tasks. You can check there whether you're on time, okay, depending on the number of the tasks that were finished, uh, regardless or as compared dun sa time nung inyong deadline. So, kung halimbawa, the deadline is near, tapos marami pa kayong task dun sa product backlog, no? So, makikita nyo dun if kailangan nyo bilisan yung trabaho nyo or not. Okay? So, customers see on-time delivery of increments and gain feedback on how the product works. So, again, no, every after sprint, the prototype produced will be evaluated by the customer. So, trust between customer and the developers is established and a positive culture is created in which everyone expects the projects to succeed. Scaling agile methods. So agile methods have improved to be successful for small and medium-sized projects that can be developed by a small co-located team. So as we mentioned earlier, no, co-located team means that all the team members are located into a single physical location wherein they could have informal communications like a 5-minute stand-up meeting. Okay, communication and interaction is very crucial in agile methodology development. It is sometimes argued that the success of these methods comes because of the improved communications, which is possible when everyone is working together and everyone is located in a single location. Again, no, uh, instead of emailing, sabihin na natin yung mga concerns, progress nyo dun sa mga team members, it's easier when you can talk to them as soon as possible. Pwedeng katabi mo lang yung tao na to. Okay, oh, Programmer 1, tapos na ako dito. Okay na ba? Can you check this one? Programmer 2, check mo nga tong ginawa ko. Okay lang ba? Okay? Wala ba tayong mali dito? Can we improve this? Etc. etc. Kung located kayo into a single location, no, pwedeng tanungin mo na lang directly yung katabi mo. Ano, okay na ba to? Check na natin. Publish na ba natin? I-test na ba natin? Instead na i-email mo pa, that could take hours or even days para magkaroon ng reply, di ba? Scaling up agile methods involves changing this to cope with larger, longer projects where there are multiple development teams, perhaps working on a different location. Okay, so scaling will be a little bit hard, no? Particularly, magkakaroon ng multiple teams or multiple development teams involved dun sa project. Large system development. So large systems are usually collections of separate communicating systems where separate teams develop each system. Frequently, these teams are working in a different places, sometimes in different time zones. So large systems are brownfield system. That is they include and interact with a number of existing system. Many of the system requirements are concerned with this interaction and do not really lend themselves to flexibility and incremental development. So as we mentioned previously, no, agile methodologies work efficiently with small to medium projects or softwares, no. If you're working on large scale, okay, wherein multiple development teams are involved and they're not located in a single location and probably located in different places and even sabi nga nila different time zones, communication sometimes impedes the development. Kasi if there are updates, no, if there are questions that will be need to raise with the other development team, it will take time. Kasi yung channels nyo, mas mabagal yan as compared dun sa co-located kayo sa isang single physical location wherein if you have question, punta ka na lang directly dun sa tao na yon. Instead na mag-email ka pa, itatawag mo pa, or minsan idadaan mo pa sa Scrum Master mo, idadaan mo pa dun sa team manager mo. Large-scale development or large-scale system development. So, large systems and other development processes are often constrained by external rules and regulations, limiting the way they can be developed. So, halimbawa, ano ba yung external rules and regulation? No? Sabihin na lang natin, all concerns of the development team should be addressed via the Scrum Master. Problema yon if you're working with different teams that works on different time zones. Kasi dalawang Scrum Master pa yung mag-uusap, imbis na yung Programmer 1 nitong team na to and Programmer 1 ng team na to mag-uusap na lang directly. Excuse me. Large systems have a long procurement and development time. So it is difficult to maintain coherent teams who know about the system over that period, as inevitably people move on to other jobs and projects. So let's say for example, large system yan, no? It could last, sabihin na natin, in a span of multiple months or even multiple years. Okay? So, kung halimbawa, new people will come dun sa unang development team and pangalawang development team, there will be an adjustment period. Kailangan nilang aralin kung ano yung trabaho na nagawa na nung previous na papalitan nila, no? So, it could be an issue. That's why, excuse me, Agile is very suitable for small to medium softwares. So large systems usually have a diverse set of stakeholders, so it is practically impossible to involve all of these different stakeholders in the development process. So kung halimbawa, it's a very large system, sabihin na natin yung stakeholders nyo are more than 10 types of people or 10 types of, sabihin na natin stakeholders, no? Ang hirap i-involve lahat ng mga tao na yon. Next, scaling out and scaling up. So, scaling up is concerned with using agile methods for developing large software systems that cannot be developed by a small team. So, scaling out is concerned how agile methods can be introduced across a large organization with many years of software development experience. Okay. So, first, no, let's start with scaling up. So, pagdating dito sa scaling up, it's very hard to scale up agile. Okay? Kasi sabi nga natin kanina, no, the preferred size or the preferred type of software to be developed by Agile will be small to medium. Okay? Softwares. So, technically, or most of the time, no, a very small development team is involved pagdating doon. So, we also have scaling out. So, it is concerned with how agile methods can be introduced across a large organization. So, we're in, no, in a development, sabihin na natin, our IT solutions company, if you'll be first introducing the agile methodology, ang tawag po natin doon is scaling out. When scaling agile methods, it is essential to maintain agile fundamentals. So, what are those fundamentals? That will be flexible planning, frequent system releases, continuous integration, test-driven development, and good team communications. Scaling up to large systems. So for large system development, it is not possible to focus only on the code of the system. You need to do more upfront design and system documentation. Kasi nga, multiple teams are involved. Okay? You need to provide them documentation para hindi nila, alam yun, para madali nilang pag-aralan from the ground up kung ano man yung ginawa nyo. So, if ever na itutuloy nila yung development, they will already have the idea what are the different tools, technologies, and techniques that was used to develop the previous prototypes. So, cross-team communication mechanisms have to be designed and used. This should involve regular phone and video conferences between team members and frequent. So, short electronic meetings where teams update each other. So, kung halimbawa, large system yan, sabi nga natin, in a development team, lagi yan, basta 5-minute stand-up meeting. So, if they're not located in a single physical location, no, the channel that they'll be using for communication should be, alam yun, easily accessible and can be used in real time. Continuous integration, wherein the whole system is built every time any developer checks in change. So, it's practically impossible. However, it is essential to maintain frequent system builds and regular releases of the system. So, let's say, no, continuous integration is basically a process na inevitable pagdating dito sa paggamit ng agile methodology kasi every prototype na i-produce nyo, magdadagdag kayo ng panibagong module, yung module na yon should be integrated. Okay? So, ang hirap i-check ng mga changes, no, na ginagawa dun sa mga modules na ini-integrate nyo if you're working on a really big system. Kasi, if there are a lot of changes that is happening dun sa software nyo, it is suggested that you provide documentation on the different types of updates that was done. Okay? So, again, no, if documentation is involved, medyo it leans more on the plan-driven as compared to agile methodology. So, scaling out to large companies. So, project managers who do not have experience of agile methods may be reluctant to accept the risk of a new approach kasi it's a new approach for you. You're not still familiar and you do not know whether it will be successful if ginamit nyo siya, di ba? Large organizations often have quality procedures and standards that all projects are expected to follow. Because of their bureaucratic nature, these are likely to be incompatible with agile methods. Okay, so sabi nga natin kanina, no, the processes are not the priorities pagdating dun sa agile. If the organization values itong mga processes na to, uh, agile is not for them. Agile method seems to work best when team members have a relatively high skill level. However, within large organizations, there are likely to be a wide range of skills and abilities because there are a lot of people in large organizations. There may be cultural resistance to agile methods, especially in those organizations that have a long history of using conventional system engineering processes. So, it's basically if there is new something or new system, sabihin na natin, or new methodology that will be implemented in the organization, no, there will always be doubts, no. So, will this new methodology be effective in that organization? Especially if yung traditional na ginagawa nila is already working. Okay? So, ganun naman yun eh. Change is always hard at the start. So, for the ano natin, no, key points, this is the last part of the discussion, no. So, a particular strength of extreme programming is the development of automated tests before a program feature is created. All tests must be successfully executed or successfully execute when an increment is incremented to the system. The Scrum method is an agile method that provides a project management framework. It is centered around a set of sprints, which are fixed time periods when a system increment is developed. Scaling agile methods for large system is difficult. Large system need upfront design and some documentation. So that will be the end of our module number 3, no? Okay, so good day. Thank you.